morning. I'm Mark Kramer from the University of Salzburg. I tend to ask provocative questions, and the question I'd like to ask is, what is it that motivates you to even be a part of reshaping education and learning? Why are you here at this conference? Why are you engaged in this research?
I don't work in formal education anymore. I'm interested and passionate about education because I don't want my 14-month-old daughter to end up in the school that I taught in latterly. Simple. I think education, there's an issue here about time. That was a semicolon, not a full stop. So,
you know, I was just about to say exactly the same thing. Brilliant.
No, there's, the school is good, don't get me wrong. The school's okay. I understand the question of time that it takes to think, to put the thought in, first of all, and then to make these small changes over a long period of time. It seems like a mammoth journey, but it's so important that I am absolutely determined that any teacher who goes near my daughter will have at least attempted that. And I don't want to see teachers who give up at the first hurdle, and I'm sure no one here is. I certainly wasn't. Voila, one sentence.
Yeah, so just to clarify, one short sentence from everybody else.
I'll try and be briefer. My background is in teaching, and I entered teaching for the same reason that most people enter teaching: want to make the world a better place, and want to make a difference in a small way. So that's it.
I love kids, and I love to hear what they have to say.
Children's rights. And the knowledge that the education system at the moment is increasing rather than challenging social inequalities.
I've always had a passion for informal learning. The first job I had was a community drama worker. I always thought in the past that that was in opposition to formal education and school education. Now I see that the real opportunity is to connect them.
I'm in a fortunate position of running a research unit at a university, and one of the golden rules that I have for myself is that all of the research projects that we do have to grow out of the classroom and have to improve the classroom in some way. And for me, it's just massively satisfying working with children and teachers to see the kinds of transformations that are possible. And I would say, if I can twist this back to the very first question you said about what pragmatic things you can do to make a change in your school, one of the things you could do is to make contact with the nearest centre of university or whatever, where there will be research units, and offer your school as a site in which people can come and experiment and explore new ideas in the classroom. Every time we take activities into schools, sometimes they work, mostly they work, but sometimes they don't work. But whatever happens, the teachers grow as a result of that process. And it is that growth that drives me and gets me up in the morning. It's a very satisfying thing to be part of.
I'm actually not in research, I'm in action. And I'm really passionate about inspiring children to be aspirational about their lives. So I think it was Mark that mentioned passion, and I think passion is the thing that will enable children's learning to be very powerful and give them the basis for being the agents of change in the future, which is what we need the next generation to be able to do.
And I think the last question, although I've still got people racked up queuing, they're so keen, is coming from right up there on the balcony. And again, it's a question for everybody, and I think we'll go back down the line in the opposite order. Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen. Just in case the panel need glasses, it is Andy Black at the back here waving, saying hello. Andy Black works at Vector, and I'll just say that loudly. Question for you. I was going to say, what's the elephant in the room that's stopping all this happening? But I'm actually going to allow you to give two elephants. Let's go for a mini herd. Two things that you think that changing the way or looking and facilitating better learning for our future learners. I'm a parent like you, and it's the same thing. I went to a bog standard comprehensive, luckily a good bog standard comprehensive. I'm very proud of it. But how can we re-engineer things? And what do you think are the two things stopping it happening? And that's me speaking personally.
I think the first thing is teachers. And I was a teacher. Teaching's at the heart of me. I think it's a very difficult job to do. The teachers need more support. They need more training. They need to be given more confidence to do the things that we're all talking about here. And they need to be able to let go. But there's a lot to do to get to that. The other thing is, I think this gentleman over here mentioned it, I think the bringing together of parents, anybody to do with a child's life, is what we need to do. Parents, schools, grandparents, communities, we should all be involved in the experience that children have. And it isn't just about being at school. It's the moment they get up in the morning to the moment they go to bed at night. That life experience and that experiential learning we want them to have, and connecting it all together. So we're all working on behalf of the child.
I think one thing, if I was to say one thing that gets in the way, is fear. And it operates at every single level of the school and the classroom. One of the things that we have to overcome when we introduce handheld devices into the classroom is teachers' kind of natural fear of this object that's somehow strange, and the children don't have any problem with that because it's their kind of environment, but the teachers are naturally very, very fearful of it. So we have to find ways of getting around that. Children and their fear. I've seen children queuing to speak to the teacher in a design studio, and you say to them, somebody in a queue of 2 or 3 students waiting to have their word with the teacher, and you go to the one at the back of the queue and you say, what do you think you ought to be doing next? And they say, well, I think I ought to be doing such and such, such and such, and such and such. And you say to them, well, that's a pretty good idea. Why don't you get on and do it? And they say, well, I think I'll just speak to the teacher first. And because they're fearful of making that step. And of course, the systemic fear of the school as a whole is oversight and league tables and all that. So I think fear at every single level of the school.
I would echo that. This morning somebody talked about moral panic, and I think this is one of the major problems that we've got to face at the moment, the fear of children engaging in a rich way on the internet. It's a very difficult question to address because these are genuine concerns that are very deeply held by people about children's access to the internet. It's not something that's new. I've done some research. There was just the same moral panic about television, about children going out to the cinema, and how dangerous going to the cinema was because it was going to corrupt children being shown adult themes in movies. So it's not something that's new, but it's something that's genuine, and we've got to find a way to address it so that children are able to be creative in their use of the internet, in their social networking. And I think it's something that all of us have got to do, is to show how children can have a creative social space that is also safe. All learning is risky, so there's always going to be an element of risk. It's how you manage that risk in appropriate ways to support effective learning.
Okay, so not to duplicate anybody else, 2 things. One of them is, I think, the depoliticization of the teaching profession and the failure of the unions to engage in real debates around curriculum reform and curriculum design. And curriculum design is the job of educators, and it's something that has been lost sight of, I think, in terms of the education profession. The second thing, and we won't get into why, but I'm just saying, I think that's one of the big issues. And the second one is still the idea that we are designing learning for young people. It's all for young people. No, it's with young people. And until we actually take seriously the idea of young people as partners in the education process and realize whatever different designs we adopt, we can't do it for them, then we aren't going to get anywhere.
I would basically echo that, because I would say that the thing that underlies the fear, other than just pure change, is the fact that we don't listen. And so one of the reasons that the that parents and children or teachers and students have issues is that they really can't talk to each other. They don't respect each other, and so the kids say the teachers just talk and talk and talk, and they don't understand technology, and so they're illiterate, and the teachers say the kids have the attention span of a gnat, and so they wind up talking totally past each other. And until we can get that conversation going, that's a real conversation, which has to do with the partnership that Kerry just mentioned, and we get some mutual respect in that conversation, then I don't think we're going to get very far in education or in much.
Yeah, I'd echo that one as well. For me, the two things I've picked out. One is lack of vision on the part of politicians, senior civil servants, those who fund education. The second one, I think, is fear of change. And a lot of the blame sitting with universities, employers, to some extent parents. I think to a lesser extent teachers. I think teachers would be freed up with curriculum and assessment reform and massive investment in their professional development. So those are the two things for me, fear and lack of vision.
And finally, the big one that comes up repeatedly when I'm working with teachers, especially in a professional development situation, is time, the lack of time that's perceived to do anything with their thinking, to even think and see it through. I wonder whether it's more related just to the constraints that come within any organisation. The minute you need an organisation to bring people together, you lose part of your percentage time and effort and energy on just making the organisation tick. The organisation could be the corporateness of the school, but it actually goes down to curriculum and assessment and examinations, which is why I don't intend to be flippant when I say that we need to disregard to some extent summative assessment for many of the conversations about learning. I was very keen that in the discussion about assessment, perhaps more people from the NFR and other organisations would benefit going 400 miles to the north, where for the last 7 years the discussion has been much further forward. I think that organisation needs to respect teachers and students as much more self-powered individuals, professionals even. Why not have professional students where they're given an iota of trust to get on with the job in hand and taught the responsibilities that come with that. The second big elephant is this desire to define everything. I read a lot of blogs, a lot of education blogs, and still do. And there's this overwhelming desire to define what 21st century learning looks like, to define what the 21st century classroom looks like, to define what assessment looks like. And I want to leave you with this thought that if, let's say we were running the clock back and we're designing 20th century learning in 1908. 1912, the Titanic sinks. At the end of 1918, the machine gun's been invented. And by 1945, we've invented nuclear bombs that cause mass destruction. We send a man to space in the 60s. We emancipate ourselves in the 60s. In the 70s, well, I was born in the 70s, and God, we learned what bad fashion sense was, and I'm still paying the price for that one. In the 90s, we learned what greed is. And in 2008, there are echoes of that coming back. In 1908, would we have been able to define what was going to happen even 4 years ahead? I don't think so. So I think that the desire to define actually holds us back in just doing it and doing what we know is right.
I would like to add my one. Can I get on my soapbox for 1 second about a totally different subject? Because I think it's really important, and I don't think anybody has brought it up in the conference, and I promised some people that I would. When I walked in, there were the people that you may have seen that were saying, be careful about the potential issues with radiation and phones and mobile devices, and I think we have to listen to those people. I think the jury is very much out, and we would do an enormous amount of disrespect and possible damage to our kids were we not to be very aware and conscious of those potential dangers, and to say the jury is out, use earbuds, do things prudently, don't spend your time with a mobile device to your ear, even though we all believe, and I'm certainly one of the great believers, that this is all coming. So that's my soapbox. Thank you.
Yes, Goss, look, we're on time, and Ewan and Laurie, Mark and Kerry, and everybody really. Right, Carol, Richard. This has been an extraordinary afternoon, I think. It's been a great discussion. We're in a different place to where we were before. The factory school really is dead. With all the time pressures of people sitting at the door with a clipboard and time and motion and one size fits all and delivering a curriculum, we are past that. And I think what's clear and what came out so strongly from everybody's contributions, really, everybody's, was that we're moving on from there. The question is, how fast and how far? And the elephant in the room, if I can just go back to that question, for me, is we just don't know how good our kids can be. We know how good they can scrape to with a model of productivity, that world of incrementalism that Michael Barber left us with, where a little better each year is enough. You know, where criterion referencing says all you're going to do is do as well as they did last time. But we're in a world where people are leaping forward, making huge gains with learning, through engagement in seductive sorts of ways. It's exciting, but we don't know how good they can be. What I'd love to see between now and next year, and you can bet I'm pouring my heart out into that, is to build some proper exemplification of just how good this could all be. So I'd like to thank everybody, including Mike, who I forgot on the way down the road.